So let's continue with our first speaker. Last time I met him, he was talking about how AI was disrupting sectors like retail, finance, and healthcare. And now we all know that this is practically the oxygen of these industries. So how can AI be a tool for sustainable gambling? Please welcome Mr. Göran Lindsjö. Are you with us?
Yeah, I hope so. Hi, Lydia.
Hi, Göran.
Hi. Nice to meet you again.
Nice to meet you again. Tell us, where are you?
I'm outside Washington, D.C., at the U.S. East Coast. So the sun is coming up here. You will have a little bit better light on me in a few minutes.
Lucky you. Göran, I will give you the word here and catch up afterwards, because eventually we have questions from the viewers, and I will have questions, so the word is yours.
Thank you very much. I appreciate to be part of this event. Yeah, that's my presentation there. I will give a background on what's happening with the AI area. Also some background from other industries. We found working with AI that some of the really most successful companies are companies which have a broad view from different types of sectors. But I will also get into AI in the behavioral science and so on. So, and of course, sustainability. Today, most Europeans are using AI every day. They use AI when using a credit card, when unlocking their smartphone, when using emails, for example, a lot of AI in social media and so on. But we also found that in USA, more people are actually using AI than in Europe, or rather more applications are used. The smart speakers, I think, is in every second home now and have been in many homes for like 4 years. Where I live in DC, we see these robots in the streets, or in the sidewalks rather, delivering foods. And people are actually using robot lawyers and quite a lot of other stuff, which has not really reached all of Europe. One reason for this is language barriers. Some of these are actually starting with the English language. So a little bit about history and about games, actually. Already in the 90s, AI was able to beat the masterminds of chess. In 2014, the AI researchers got a question: when do you think you might be able to win in the game of Go, the Asian old game of Go, which is like 1 million times as complex as chess? And the answer among those quite optimistic AI researcher was that if we continue to have an exponential growth of data and machine power, maybe in 21 years from now, we can do that. And they were so wrong, because they managed to do it just 2 years later. And this system was trained on thousands of games to grandmasters in the game of Go. The year later, 2017, some smart people decided to see what's happening if we are not training our system playing games to grandmasters, but just playing games to other computers. And that new system won over the old system. So what we humans added was really negative. Even the best of us was really negative. And in the same year, they also managed to win Texas Hold'em. That is, they managed to bluff better than the humans did. And this has continued, this very fast development. this is about trying to identify if a text is written by a computer or by a human. And just 2018, 76% of us were able to identify that it was written by a computer. And now that's almost random guessing. That is, it's extremely hard to say for any of us if a text is written by a computer or a human. From a few important industries, we see disruptions going on. For example, in the retail business here in USA, some of these trademarks in the bottom there are iconic for the US public, and most of them have either got bankrupt or lost perhaps 99% of their value the last few years. And this happened before the pandemic, actually. And the reason is, of course, Amazon, which started using hundreds of AI applications at least 4, 5, 6 years ago. And what Warren Buffett says is not a good idea to let Jeff Bezos have a head start for many years. And you can also see the results now. And what, for example, Amazon and other companies are doing is sort of a perpetual motion. That is, they get more and more data, which they use for better analytics and use that for better service and better products. And they get more customers, more users, which give them more data. So they have this in like hundreds of applications today, this AI flywheel, as they call it. And another example is, of course, Google, which call themselves an AI company. They are not like a search company or a digitalized company or something like that. The core business is AI for Google today. And this is some of the things you can search. You can see some clothes you like, and you immediately get where you can buy that to the left, or you can hum a song. If you haven't tried that yet, please do. It's quite fun. And to the right, the result you get is not only references, you can also get the actual answer to your question to the right. So these companies, together with a few others, are today actually the most valuable companies of all types of companies in the world. These are the 7 most valuable companies today, and all of them are producing AI and sell AI. And the value of these 7 together, if you compare that to all the business on the European stock markets, including UK, is like the same. It's a little bit more, a little bit less. So that is really the value of the AI company. So this is something you might like to show people with discussing AI is something in the future rather in the present. When you look into these companies and their decision making, it's quite interesting to see that what we normally have among most executives are a focus on their own experience and their own intuition. But what's happening now is really that they are using their own tools, their own AI and analytics to be able to make the decision making more evidence-based, really. But these are also challenged by new companies. This is just one example with a completely new business model. You get your clothes without asking for exactly what you want. You use AI to determine which type of clothes you get. And what happened is that just 1% of the customers are resending their clothes back to Stitch Fix. The equivalent thing maybe in Europe would be Zalando, where I think like 70% of each delivery get back. So what people find is they prefer what they get from the AI recommendation compared to the compared to humans, really, or compared to they themselves, rather. A similar thing is Netflix. What they used to have was a recommendation made by algorithms written by people. That is, if you have watched a lot of action movies, you get recommendations on more action movies. But when they changed that to AI a couple of years ago, they found that AI recommend quite a lot of documentaries for people watching action movies. So this has really changed their business a lot. And now they have a extremely low churn to be that type of company compared to others. So you can see that they are really challenging companies like Amazon in video streaming. And they are also using AI for a lot of other stuff. For example, when they show the movie, they have thousands of pictures to select from, depending on who you are. That is, they personalize what you see, really. Another industry, auto makers, this is statistics from Tesla, where they find that manual-driven cars have an accident every 500,000 miles, and when they are on autopilot, they are 10 times better. And they have been in that business for quite long, so the value in the stock market for Tesla is now higher than any other company. And you see, for example, Ford and General Motors on the bottom of that screen to the right there, and each of them are producing more than 100 times the number of cars what Tesla is doing, and still Tesla is more worth because the advantage they have in AI. And the automakers are a good example of an industry where they not only use AI for core business, but also for back office, and these are some examples to the right. Another industry, finance, bank, insurance. Some of these started with AI chatbots, but they are now using AI for really a lot of different types of application. And one reason for that is that AI is so good on predictions compared to other technology. They are, for example, using AI to detect money laundering for many years. So what happens in several of these sectors is that the early adopters, they are investing more than the ones that are in the phase of testing, and even more than the ones that are called followers by MIT. And what Susan Ettlinger to the right say, that the more you know about AI, the greater your sense of urgency from interviewing these different types of companies. And another industry which maybe is close to the gambling industry is sports. They have been using AI for a while, for example, for fan segmentation, for monitoring players' health, to optimize betting practice, and now during the pandemic to be able to have some audience on the events. But also to the right for dynamic ticket pricing, for example, which is also used by hotels and other industries. And one example I find interesting is to the bottom right, where they use AI to be able to cross-sell and upsell merchandise as well. They also use AI really to engage and empower their fans. So the fans can get a lot of more data on every event and on every player or every active person in this sports. And one nice example, I think, is to the bottom left here, where people are able to participate during the pandemic, so they can see their own picture in real time up up at a stance. In the gambling industry, some of you probably know more about this than I do, but it's used for personalization, and that is the same in finance, in sports, in like every business, a lot of personalizations. It's used to curb cheating, it's used to optimize marketing campaign. It's used for chatbots, also like other industries. It's used to suggest a casino layout, for example, to detect fraud of different types, for example, fake IDs or credit card fraud. I think they learned a lot from the finance industry, and this is one of my foremost ideas, really, to learn from other industries. A few words regarding AI for good, which I think is a very interesting and growing movement, and that is really supported by United Nations. What different types of analysts say is that it's the best hope really for most of the 17 different goal areas in SDGs today. And just a few examples of this is that AI is used for climate change research. It's used for example, gender equality, where people found that very few successful women were really portrayed by a bio at Wikipedia, and changed that by using AI to find these people and to actually write the articles. It's also used to trace plastics, to reduce the bee extension, for example. And companies like IKEA in Sweden, like Amazon, like Uber, are going into the city farming industry, which is growing for the moment. And also in healthcare, and some of these healthcare organizations have been really successful using AI. They learned how to use different parts of AI, like diagnostics, planning, personalization again, and prediction, of course. So when they know how to do one type of prediction, it's easier for them to use AI for the next one. And part of this really you can see in behavioral science, where AI is used to detect depression in small children 3 to 8 years old. It's used in UK and in US by social workers to proactively find families which might have problems. And it's also starting to be used in Sweden by something called BRIS, where children can call or chat, and they have sometimes a long line of small children waiting, and they will start using AI to help that. And in Japan, they are using AI to prevent bullying. It's also used in dependency treatment. I think more in alcohol dependency treatment, but it's quite similar in some respects to gambling dependency treatment. And when it's used to alcohol dependency treatment, the role for the alcohol counselor is really changed. They are climbing up on the ladder, so to say, when AI deal with a lot of repeatedly stuff. And this is something which is very common when you implement AI, that you rather get augmentation of what we people do instead of replacing people. That is not that common, really. So it helps with different tasks. So that's the reason why many of the players in the area are talking about augmented intelligence rather than artificial intelligence. This means when the machines are doing more and more learning and can take the repeated stuff, the administrative stuff, we as people have more time to do things that we are good at doing, like in the previous picture. But this normally means that lifelong learning is getting more and more important. And this learning we can see today in the US is getting more personalized and what they call atomized, that it is very small chunks of learning, and it's also digitized, of course. Just to wrap up this, AI is a general purpose technology, and that's something I meet among the not so mature organizations, that they have an idea of one or two or maybe three different types of applications. But the successful organizations like Amazon, for example, are using it in so many different ways, like electricity. So I think it's important to remember it's a general purpose technology. So, Lydia, I hope I didn't spend too much time on this, really.
Absolutely fascinating facts, Göran. Thank you very much. You have also a couple of questions here from the viewers, but before I give you them, I really would like to ask you that I know that you travel around the world, you meet a lot of stakeholders, you talk about AI. Have we understood the possibilities of AI enough?
No, I don't think any of us really have understood the possibilities, because what we can see is we get new types of application all the time, really. It's not only that applications are getting better, they are also widening the scope of applications. So no, I don't think so. But still, as I said, there are companies which really trying to reuse what they know in many different new areas. And I think we have a lot to learn from that type of companies, really.
Okay, Göran, here are two questions from the viewers. Should AI be regulated? Yes or no?
Many people have looked into that, and I was working actually a bit with the Obama administration in 2016, and what they decided was that instead of being proactive of regulating AI, it might be better to follow what's happening extremely close and see what we really need to regulate. But I think Europe normally spend a lot more time on discussing different type of regulations compared to maybe Asia and the US. But I suppose the answer will be that some parts need to be regulated. For example, the car manufacturers maybe like to have things regulated before investing billions of dollars in different types of applications.
Okay. Final question. It's actually two questions. I will try to sort of combine them. Do you see any potentiality for AI to be used for exploitation, harm? Could it interfere, for example, with the news presented to consumers on social media? What do you think?
The question was if it can be used harmful.
Yes, let's start with that. Yes.
Yes, certainly it can be used harmful. What I normally do when I have this short time is I like to more present the possibilities, but there are a lot of harmful use already, really, with AI. Criminals can use AI, of course, and you can use AI to be able to surveillance of your people, for example, if you're a totalitarian state. So, yes, there are many examples of that. And the other question, sorry.
The other question was, can AI interfere with the news presented to consumers on social media?
Yes, it can in many different ways. I showed that it can actually write the articles, but it can also, of course, choose what is like personalize what is shown to you. So it can strengthen a filter bubble. But I also showed a couple of examples, maybe from Stitch Fix and Netflix, and the same is for Spotify, where actually that bubble is rather. They get a hole in the bubble, so you get information from more sources. But yes, it can do that.
Okay. Thank you, Göran.